If there's a major difference between the boomers and the builders and the task of the new generation of Catholics who are already between 22 and in their 40s, more than 50% of the adult population today, it may be this, that our strong Catholic institutions of support and our Catholic conversations are out of sync with their developmental needs. We have before us a generation of young adults and young Catholics who are trying to negotiate faith and life in a dramatically different way. The polarizing debates that get boomers and builders all upset are actually quite boring to these young people. They don't care about red states, blue states. They don't care about red hymnals, blue hymnals. Actually, in the seminary, I used to, as vice rector, there were seminarians who would only sing from the red conservative hymnal, who would never touch the blue hymnal. There were blue hymnals that wouldn't touch the red hymnals. I had to tell them we were not in a red state, blue state situation. This new generation is being forced by new and untested rules of economic engagement. They have two challenges before them: the reinvention of work in America and the untested rules and looming fears about a global economy. The landscape of young adulthood is changing dramatically. It's being realigned by economic forces that we are not talking about. America has already moved from being a relational culture focused on family and faith to a global work culture that places a priority and a heavy price on one's job and one's career above everything else. Young people are watching as the economic rules are changing underneath them without any guarantee. Used to be that if you got a college education, you got a job and you got a career. Now the fact is that not even a master's degree gets you a job, no less a career. But it gives you a lot of debt. And that's what they're worried about. Young people are coming out of college and out of master's degrees with $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 worth of debt. And lucky for them, they fall in love with somebody who also has $60,000, $70,000 worth of debt. And they wonder whether they'll ever be able to marry, whether they'll ever be able to have a house, and whether they'll ever be able to have children. It's not a question of ideology and theology at that level. It's a question of economics. When the Public Religion Research Institute at Georgetown asked millennials, people 17 to 31, what their highest concern was, 76% of them said unemployment, finding a job. And then they said, okay, so what's your second concern? The federal deficit. They see this extending out for a long time. With jobs and careers becoming more and more of a gamble, young people are putting off their commitments. They're delaying decisions about love and marriage, families, settling down. And you know where it's happening the most? The State of Our Union's report out of the University of Virginia says it's not happening on the liberal coast, where you would expect the breakdown of marriage to be happening more intensely. Places like San Francisco, Boston, those liberal hot centers. Actually, the breakdown of marriage in America is happening in the middle of America now. That's where it's most intensified. right smack in the middle, conservative middle of America. Most of the important decisions that Americans and young Catholics are making about sexuality, marriage, friends, careers, children are happening out of the reach of our congregations because the shelf life of our programs for children stop at confirmation. We're not even hearing these questions. Because of our institutions of support may no longer match up to the developmental needs of young adults, they're becoming very improvisational about their relationships, about how they socialize, and they're very improvisational when it comes to church. Sometimes, maybe. That's what we're up against. So let me put the ecclesiastical dilemma succinctly. When the builder generation needed to defend the faith and move a generation up out of disadvantage, we built schools, universities, colleges. When there were no safety social nets for poor Catholics, we built hospitals, orphanages, St. Vincent de Paul societies. We responded institutionally. So let me ask the obvious question. When now 2 generations of younger post-boomer Catholics ask about jobs, unemployment, the state of the economy, how they're going to make it with the burden of debt that they're likely to inherit because of the liabilities we have given them, what has been the response of our dioceses and parishes? Are we listening to this generation? Are we responding to this generation? I want to highlight one more very significant generational change that I think we ignore to our peril. And that is the change in the church practice of young women. And here I'm using the excellent research of Sister Patricia Whitberg from Indiana State University. From sociological research done to date across denominations in America, we now know that we have 2 generations, Generation Xers and Millennials. Those are people 17 to 50, who are not only less devout than their elders, but show what Whitberg calls a benign neglect of religion that leaves them sometimes curious about faith and spirituality, but, quote, not yet interested enough to be drawn back to the church. So programs that are designed specifically for welcoming home Catholics or welcoming them back fail to realize they've never been home. They've never been home. But here's the most ominous result of the data for Catholics below the age of 50. While both genders of millennial and Gen X Americans are far less devout than their elders, the women are more alienated than the men are. If the church loses millennial and Gen X women, it will lose their children as well. Now, we know that up until now, women have been more likely to join churches and more likely to practice the faith. They're more likely to be more orthodox in their beliefs. They're more devoted to the practice of the faith. U.S. women were more likely to identify themselves as very spiritual, of reading Scripture, of saying that they've had an experience of God. So it's of some alarm where we now see that women in their 20s and 30s are even more alienated from religion than Gen Xers, women in their 30s and 40s. And that they are more irreligious, if that's even imaginable, than men their age. And that's the first time in history. This is something that parish councils have to take hold of. We are losing our women. We have been comfortable losing our men. But now we're losing our women. And I think we need a conversation about what we're going to do about that.